Hey, with us from Capitol Hill, we've got member of the Armed Services and Intelligence Committee's Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Senator, great to have you here. I want you to prove Hillary Clinton wrong. Do you condemn Donald Trump in the strongest of terms for saying that Muslim Americans should not come here?
Joe, I strongly disagree with that proposal, and even Mr. Trump has begun to walk it back. In the end, though, we have to recognize that there is a small number of Muslims around the world who oppose Western civilization and want to launch terror attacks against us. Right. Reportedly in California, there were some neighbors of Farouk and Malik who suspected that they might be assembling an arsenal for a kind of attack, but they were worried about the forces of political correctness and didn't report it to the police, even though the Obama administration repeatedly says you have to say something. If you see something, say something. Right.
So Senator, isn't it important then under that scenario, and that's why I say we need to do more as a party and as a nation reaching out to our Muslim American brothers and sisters, doesn't that suggest my point that we do need greater outreach? We do need to make Muslim Americans feel like, not that they're being demonized, but that we consider them a part of the American family.
Of course, Joe, and not just Muslim Americans. We need to not just encourage Muslims around the world to try to lead a reform movement within Islam that rejects the Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, ISIS viewpoint, but we also need to highlight it when they do so. Look at the United Arab Emirates. Just last week, the first female Arab legislative president took office in the UAE. Last year, the very first airstrikes against the Islamic State were conducted by a female Emirati pilot. The UAE just donated money to create Hindu temples for the many Hindus they have working in their country. Look in Egypt, where President al-Sisi has been very strong condemning the Muslim Brotherhood and its ideology that led to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. When we encourage Muslims around the world to reject radical Islam, we also need to highlight and celebrate them when they do.
What should the president, obviously I've made it very clear I was disappointed with what the president said on Sunday night. What was your reaction? And if you were disappointed as well, what should the president have said? What do we need to do to defeat ISIS?
Well, Joe, I was very deeply disappointed in the president's speech, as were you. We've gotten to the point where the Islamic State can inspire attacks in California that killed 14 Americans, or in direct attacks in Paris that killed 130 plus of our NATO allies' citizens. Yet the president is just going to double down on the same failed strategy that has gotten us to this point. He needs to be honest with the American people about the failures of our strategy. He needs to take the handcuffs off of our military in Iraq and in Syria, significantly accelerate the pace of the bombing. He needs to give the confidence necessary to countries like Jordan and Egypt and the United Arab Emirates.
How about ground troops, Senator? Donald Trump yesterday said that he would support 10,000 ground troops as part of an international coalition. Would you?
Well, Joe, I support American ground troops. The number is really up to the generals. It's going to require some number of troops, not necessarily frontline infantrymen who are kicking down doors or shooting bad guys. A lot of these armies need the kind of professional logistics capability. Whether it's another 5,000 or another 10,000 in addition to the 4,000 that we have in Iraq now is really a question for our military generals and admirals. Right. The real thing that our military needs, though, is the political leadership to say we will put the troops on the ground necessary to lead a coalition of our moderate Arab allies like the UAE, like Jordan, to defeat the Islamic State once and for all. Remember, the Islamic State is not 10 feet tall. We're talking about 30,000 troops. You know, that's 1/6 the size of our Marine Corps, respectively. Yeah. And they don't have an Air Force. They don't have helicopters. This can be done with the political will.
And you know, Willie, that's the great irony is that President Obama could make ISIS look like a JV team if he was willing to fight. JV team.
Yeah, and Senator Cotton obviously is uniquely qualified to talk about ground troops, having served honorably in both Iraq and Afghanistan as the platoon leader. So how long do you see this fight going, Senator Cotton? I mean, some people talk about this as a generational or multi-generational fight, but as you say, if you send in the right forces, you could mop up ISIS relatively quickly. Which way do you see it going?
Well, I see that in two different ways. One, the short term, the fight against the Islamic State itself, with a serious coalition led by the United States, but primarily manned by allies like the UAE and Jordan, with Turkish contributions as well. I do think it would be a relatively short fight. We might have a stabilizing troop presence there for several years, the way we've had in Germany and Japan and South Korea for decades. But there is a generational fight to this element, to this fight as well, and that's the fight against the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. That's not a fight that we can primarily lead. That's a fight that the forces of moderate Islam around the world have to conduct. But we have to encourage them, and we have to celebrate them when they do, and we have to stand side by side with those forces of moderate Islam.
Amen. And really quickly before we go, Senator Cotton, are you confident that we can bring some of those Arab states around to join this coalition, troops, and contribute to the fight?
I'm very confident. I've traveled to many of the countries in the Arab world over the last 3 or 4 months. I've met with many of their ambassadors or foreign ministers here in Washington. They are all crying out for greater American leadership, and they are all willing to do their part if America provides the glue to that coalition to defeat the Islamic State.
All right, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks for your time.